Okay, we have a quorum. Order, please. Madam Clerk, whenever you're ready. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the committee. There are two changes that have been distributed to the committee this morning. The first one is under the consent items, item 5.4, with respect to the lease agreement with City Housing Hamilton Corporation, Career Development Center, 181 Main Street West. This report is being withdrawn and will come back to the committee at a future date. And under public hearings, item 6.1, Christopher Cutler's request to appear before the committee respecting the Hamilton Farmers Market. Mr. Cutler has advised that he will not be presenting before the committee at this time. And also the committee has been distributed with the minutes of the January 15th, 22nd, and 27th meetings of the General Issues Committee. And item 8.6 in the agenda, which is report 14-001 of the School Board Property Subcommittee meeting of January 28th, 2014. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Members of committee, before requesting a motion to approve the agenda as amended, I would advise that we have one in-camera matter which requires external legal counsel to attend. Arrangements have been made for external legal counsel to attend this meeting at 12 noon, at which time the committee will move into closed session to entertain the private and confidential matter. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Pearson, seconded by Powers. All in favor? Carried. Members of committee, are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none. Members of committee, you have been distributed with the minutes from the January 22nd and 27th minutes of the General Issues Committee. Are there any questions with respect to these minutes? Moved by Collins and seconded by Duval. All in favor? Carried. Members of committee, before requesting a motion for the consent items, I would remind you that staff has requested that item 5.4 be withdrawn. Are there any questions with respect to the balance of the consent items? Moved by Bertina, seconded by Jackson. All in favor regarding consent items 5.1 to 5.3? Carried. I would now call on Sylvia Boyce to approach the podium to provide her presentation respecting enforcement of the Criminal Code and the Westray Bill.
Okay. Yeah, I'm short. Okay. Get closer together, okay?
Moved by Powers, seconded by Pearson. All in favor? Carried. Now, with respect to the public hearings, we have 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 all speaking on the same item, and they're here today. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mayor, councillors, my name is Sylvia Boyce. I work for the United Steelworkers National Office as a health and safety staff rep, and also I'm responsible for health and safety for Ontario and Atlantic Canada as the District 6 Health and Safety Coordinator. I am here today with my colleagues from the Hamilton Steelworkers Area Council, in which we are doing a joint presentation together. For the record, I have Mike Misio with me, Darren Green, Frank Michelli, Peter Ridehouse, Frank Crowder, and Mike Hanachuk. We are very appreciative for the opportunity to appear before you today to speak about a very important issue that not only impacts the people of Hamilton, but people all across Canada. Every year, over 1,000 Canadians die at work. It's one of the worst records in the developed world. In fact, Ontario has the highest fatality rates per jurisdiction in Canada. And we are here because we have a national campaign that we are launching with a motion. Our campaign is clearly about educational and awareness and enforcement of a law that already exists, known as the Westray Law, the Westray Amendments to the Criminal Code. And what we're basically here to talk about is this law was passed more than 10 years ago through the House of Commons when they came together in an historic vote to unanimously pass the Westray Act. The legislation came in response to a horrific Westray coal mine explosion in Nova Scotia, May 9th, 1992, and after a strong lobby campaign for no more Westrays. The legislation was intended to hold employers criminally responsible for serious workplace injuries and deaths in cases of negligence. Unfortunately and tragically, 9 years later, 9,000 Canadians have been killed on the job, and yet not one corporate executive or single individual has faced a day in jail. To date, there have been very few criminal charges. Often the charges have been dropped or plea bargained to lesser charges and fines. The analogy is this: whenever someone is killed on the streets, the police immediately assume it may be a criminal act and open up a criminal investigation. They collect evidence and examine things with an eye towards possibly laying charges. The public expects to see that the guilty go to jail. The same could be said when you look at drunk drivers or domestic assault and gun violence. Yet when someone is killed at work, there is no collecting of evidence as if it were a murder investigation. There's no charges laid and no one goes to jail. Workplace fatalities are not looked at through a criminal lens of accountability. We believe that that has to change, and we are not alone. The families who's lost their loved ones as a result of workplace fatalities stand in our quest for justice. While not directly under the jurisdiction of local government, we are asking that you support this campaign because we recognize City Council as leaders in the community, and this is a community issue. This is not a union issue. Workers are being killed every day across Canada, regardless of their affiliations to unions or not, that people are being killed. The Canadians who have died at work are parents, their coaches, volunteers, the people that you see every day, the people who helped build Hamilton, the people you represent, and as representatives of the people of our community, we need your support to convince senior levels of government that this critical issue needs attention. I would now pass you over to my colleague, Mike Miccio.
Hi. Sadly, Hamilton's has had its fair share of workplace fatalities. In fact, in 2013, the following people lost their lives because of work: Michael Robinson, Paul Jackson, Norman Reagan, Gunter Schultz, Gabriel Padano, and after the day of mourning in 2013, Kevin Rapazzo, Christopher Birdsell, and of course Shyler Six, the 9-year-old who died just before Christmas. If we could show you the video at this time, if possible.
Yes.
Every day, millions of us get up and go to work. Sadly, many don't get to come home. You see, every year, 1,000 Canadians are killed on the job. It's one of the worst records in the developed world. It's sad, wrong, and preventable. In fact, Canada has a law that says if you kill a worker, you could go to jail. It's called the Westray Law, named in honor of the 26 miners killed in a horrific explosion in Nova Scotia. But a decade after the United Steelworkers helped get the law passed, some 9,000 workers have died yet not a single person has gone to jail. That's because the law is not being enforced. What's worse is that the number of workplace fatalities are actually rising. Every worker deserves the right to come home. It's time to stop the killing. Enforce the law.
Jordan was a very fun-loving young gentleman. He was always full of life, and to him, life was wonderful, and he lived his life in the moment.
He would be there for you in a heartbeat, and no matter what time or no matter what day it was, he was always there for you.
The knock on the door came about 3:30 in the morning, and there was two people standing at my door. Well, Brian answered the door, and they came in, and they didn't say too much, and then they just said there was an incident. I said, an incident? What do you mean an incident? Is Jordan dead or alive? Well, we can't tell you that. All we can tell you is that he has no vital signs. And then we had to go through all the horrific stuff that any parent does not have to do, is to make arrangements to bury your child.
My brother Jordan Fram was working with Jason Chenier on June 8th, 2011, when a run of muck overcome the two of them, and they were both killed instantly.
350 tons of muck and water and sand. When they opened the gate, there's a lever to open a gate, because I guess it was blocked. All of a sudden it was like a huge explosion. I definitely do think someone should be held accountable. Should be company and supervisors, management, who were aware of the situation, have known about it for years. And
in the instance with Jordan and Jason, this accident had happened, a very similar accident had happened a few years before at that mine. The management at Stobie Mine knew that there's an issue with water, and those issues had never been rectified. If companies were held criminally accountable for their actions, this incident would never have happened. People would have taken more responsibility to make those changes if they knew that their lives were on the line as well. If they knew that they could go to jail, as opposed to their company with these deep pockets simply paying a fine that means nothing to them. We continue this fight for our neighbors, for our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers. We never want somebody to feel that hurt again, and we want to make those changes.
we know that Jordan would want that as well, because that is something that he would do. He would fight.
A resolution has been submitted for your consideration. It reads as follows. Therefore, be it resolved that this council urge our provincial, territorial government, specifically the Attorney General and Labour Minister, to ensure that Crown attorneys are educated, trained, and directed to apply the Westray Amendments. Dedicated prosecutors are given the responsibility for health and safety fatalities. Police are educated, trained, and directed to apply the Westray Amendments. And finally, there is a greater coordination among regulators, police, and Crowns so that health and safety regulators are trained to reach out to police when there is a possibility that Westray Amendment charges are warranted.
We believe that this motion will help ensure that training is ongoing, that our Crowns and our police are educated and trained to apply the Westray Amendments. The solution is to have a system where all parties are trained to investigate and prosecute serious industrial accidents. There needs to be clear lines of investigative authority, and the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Labour should be working together in cooperation and coordination. And we believe these actions are doable, and we believe that these actions will contribute significantly to ensuring that when Canadians leave for work, they come home safely. A mother who lost her son in a horrific workplace accident said something to me that I will never forget, and quite frankly penetrated very deep into the core of my soul. She said, "There is nothing worse than sending your loved one to work with a lunch bag, only to have them come home in a body bag." Therefore, we are respectfully requesting that this council lend their voice to support this campaign and pass this resolution and ensure that parents don't lose children and children don't lose parents because they went to work. For your information, I just wanted to let you know that the Sudbury City Council has unanimously passed our motion last week on January 28th, supporting our resolution and our motion. And yesterday, I was up in Sault Ste. Marie, and Sault Ste. Marie has passed this motion unanimously as well. And furthermore, there are presentations occurring across the country at various municipalities. We have met and are seeking meetings with all attorneys generals in every province across Canada and the heads of prosecution as well. And we've also reached out to the police organizations. In fact, we had a meeting a couple weeks ago with the Hamilton Police Association, and we presented our campaign and our motion just like we did here today. And the Police Association Board of Directors voted in favor 8-0 in support of this campaign for education and awareness. And next week I will be meeting with the Canadian Police Association Board of Directors as well. So we clearly are working with the authorities, and we want to. This campaign in any way is not laying fault, attacking or blaming anyone. We have a law. The problem is it's not being utilized because of lack of knowledge, education, and training, and we're simply asking that it be enforced. When you look at Canada's statistics alone and Ontario's, it's clear that there's a need for coordination and direction amongst all regulatory parties. Thank you very much, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
We do have a list of questionnaires, and first on the list is Councillor Duval.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and Sylvia and Darren, Peter, Mike, and Frank, and who else we're missing here? Thank you, and Mike. Thanks very kindly. I really appreciate you coming out and making us aware here in this council. I commend you for what you're doing, and especially going across the country and asking municipalities to never forget the West Ray mine disaster. I mean, it should never have happened. But I do have some questions to ask you. I understand that we do have a policy in the city of Hamilton with our police department that deals with policies, procedures of an accident in a workplace. Is that true?
Yes, my understanding is they do. The Hamilton Police Department does have a policy, and there are other other municipalities in Canada, in some parts of Canada, that do have a policy in place, and this is a good thing that they have it. The problem is not necessarily resting with the policy. The problem is the education and direction from the top down. So when I say that, I'm referring to the attorneys general. They are responsible for the administration and direction of justice in our provinces, and they work collectively with their colleagues, the Crown prosecution and the police, and there's a clear disconnect and lack of coordination and sharing of information and support, and that is where it's wonderful that Hamilton has a policy. We feel that this campaign and our request, this motion, will only enhance and help our authorities do their job to the best of their abilities like they always do, but they'll get support and resources, and it will enhance that policy.
Okay, and I thank you for that. And so that this would not change anything. This is basically just enforcing and making the awareness and making sure the proper people have the education of remembering them of the West Ray Act.
Absolutely, correct.
Correct? Okay, so we're not, Sylvia, you're not here today to change the law, Bill C-45. You're here today, I understand, is to make sure that it's not forgotten, to make sure that the proper procedures are in place right out through the country, not just in certain areas, but make sure that every municipality understands what that is, and not just industrial accidents they walk into and call it industrial accident. It's about enforcing Bill C-45, holding those accountable that are responsible for having a safe workplace. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Deval. Just so you know that in regards to workplace fatalities, as I mentioned, this is not a labor issue. It really is about working people, regardless of anybody's affiliation. And although there could be policies in place in certain cities and whatnot, the reality is that policies can often be changed and amended and adjusted. But when there's clear direction and support for education from the proper authorities, then there could be coordination, and ministries of Labours and the ministries of Justice can work together to help prevent it. And sadly, I mean, I'm ashamed personally. I'm a very proud Canadian and a proud Hamiltonian. I've lived here for over 35 years, but when Ontario has the worst record for fatalities, workplace fatalities, compared to any other province, I think we all should be very concerned with that. And when Canada has one of the worst records in the developed world, you know, those numbers are alarming, and I think that we all have a responsibility to work together and do what we can to educate and provide support and resources to the regulatory bodies and the justice system so that we can prevent this.
Thanks, Sylvia. And I just want to remind you to your group also that I know this council does care about the West Ray bill, and you know, we've sent our condolences throughout those years, and in fact, it was just a little while ago where this council voted to send a representation down to the 20th anniversary of that, in remembering the disaster, and that was, they sent myself down, and I was very proud to represent the city of Hamilton, along with another Hamiltonian, Fred Dale,
Yes.
who was a citizen at, actually made up 26 angels of stained glass to give to each family, and not only said it was from himself, but actually from the city of Hamilton, and I know they were very proud of that. So I will listen to my other but Mr. Chair, just asking you, do you want our comments now, or do you want to wait?
There are other questions, but if you'd like, I have no problem with you putting forward your motion accordingly.
Okay.
And I'll recognize that accordingly.
But if you want, I mean, I'd like to make some comments also that I know of.
Well, perhaps we should exhaust the questions, and then we can come back.
And if you come back to me on
Sure,
the list,
absolutely.
I appreciate it. Move the motion.
So
Thank you.
next on the list of questioners is Mayor Bertina. Mayor Bertina?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. What do we know about other jurisdictions in the world? Because the most famous culpability that I recall was a Japanese airline crash. And the CEO or the president took his own life as expressing guilt for the terrible calamity that occurred. But does this in fact happen in other jurisdictions around the world?
Do you mean our campaign as far as education and enforcement, or?
Are you aware, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, of other jurisdictions that have laid charges against corporate executives with regard to deaths in the workplace?
Yes, there has been some charges laid in the UK and also in Australia. I'm not sure, Mayor Bettina, in regards to Japan and some of the other countries, but certainly Canada itself has one of the worst records in the developed world when we look at workplace fatalities. But there are some other countries that are now doing their own type of, campaign and requests for education and training, and it involves different regulatory bodies as well as their justice system, but their governments are administered significantly different than ours for the most part.
So what we have before us is a simple request to show action on what already exists in legislation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Mayor Bertina. And we have Councillor Clark, then Pearson. Councillor Clark.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for appearing before us today on a very serious issue. I'm wondering if you can answer a couple of questions. when there's an injury in a workplace, I know the Ministry of Labor responds, and normally the police department responds. Those are the only, other than EMS or that, but is there anyone else with investigative authority that responds?
No, actually, what happens is in the event of a workplace fatality or serious injury, the police are called and the Ministry of Labor are called in, and then there's, a sharing of information, of facts as to what happened, and then the actual investigation and whatnot is passed over to the Ministry of Labor, Health and Safety investigators, and they do the inspection, and then they basically determine whether or not charges should be laid under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, not under the criminal code.
So the police, at some point, they say, okay, it's in your hands, see you,
Yes.
Charlie, and Charlie's left there as the labor inspector.
That's correct. And it's not because the police are washing their hands of it, it's because of the direction that they are given from,
For 20 years.
Yes.
And let's talk, if we may, Mr. Chairman, about the labor inspector. What charges can the labor inspector lay, and under what act?
Okay, well, the labor inspector can lay a multitude of charges under the Occupational Health and Safety Act for negligence, covering various aspects. So there could be fines. Obviously, usually they are fines. And if I bring your attention to, for example, when we just watched that video there, those were people from Sudbury, Ontario, and that event happened in June of 2011. And what happened was the recent charges and decision were published, and it was decided that there was going to be $1,050,000 fine for the fatality that took place at the Stobie Mines in Sudbury. And that fine itself, although it was the largest fine under the Occupational Health and Safety Act in Ontario, and the fact of the matter is, when you're dealing with large corporations, it simply becomes a cost of doing business. And as far as the police being able to lay charges and proceed, just the way the process worked, they came to the scene, and then after their investigation, it was handed over to the health and safety regulators. But there was clear evidence of negligence, workplace negligence, and the fact that management was aware that there were machineries that were not guarded properly, that there were certain faulty equipment and procedures in the workplace, but there was no consequences. And it's real. That's one example. And I'm sure you've all heard of the Metron construction, fatalities of killing 4 workers in Toronto, and 1 seriously injured. The fine was initially there under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. People were charged under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and the fines were initially assessed at $200,000 with a victim surcharge. And after appeal, that fine had increased to $750,000. In some of the documents that I did leave for you today, there's a legal brief that will basically, it summarizes what's happened in the decade since the Westray amendments were passed. And to date, although you've heard there's been over 9,000 deaths since that law was passed, and each year approximately 1,000 workers die on the job, there's only been 10 criminal negligence charges to date. And of those 10 charges, as I said, many of them were either dropped or they were plea bargains, and there was only 3 successful prosecutions, which all ended in plea bargains. 2 were in Quebec and 1 was in Canada. And when we have been meeting and speaking with, some attorneys general from other provinces and our own, and police and other regulators, they're all claiming, some of them, they really don't have that education and training, and they're not coordinating and working together in regards to understanding the Westray amendments and how to actually apply it. So there's a huge disconnect.
There are attorney generals indicating that they don't have the training?
Well, no, I'm sorry, I misspoke on that. Not the attorneys general. They are saying that they've been given the West Ray amendments and the law, but the actual chances of them being successful in criminal charges, it's a difficult task for them to follow when there's various partners involved in the investigation of workplace fatalities. And when the police show up and then they are gone and then it's turned over to the health and safety regulators, often there are flaws in the investigation process, and unfortunately there have not been enough utilization of the West Ray amendments. There are some provinces specifically who feel, attorneys general feel, there needs to be more training. Specifically, Manitoba recently announced that they were going to have a dedicated prosecutor directly responsible for workplace health and safety fatalities. And Nova Scotia recently, actually after the 20th anniversary event when Hamilton City Council sent down some representatives to support the West Ray commemoration, there was meetings, and the attorneys general there and the Crown prosecutions got together with the minister, and they have now implemented a dedicated prosecutor to deal with workplace fatalities and recognize that there needs to be consistency and coordination. And presently, British Columbia, I'm sure you all must have heard recently with the two BC sawmill explosions in Prince George, where 2 workers were killed in both explosions and 20 plus were seriously injured in both, that the Globe and Mail, I believe it was a week and a half ago, I don't have the exact date, but it was clearly determined that there was an unlikely chance of a successful prosecution, although the WorkSafe BC, which is the same as our WSIB here in Ontario, concluded that there was negligence and charges should be laid. The RCMP had determined that there was a flawed investigation process amongst the 3 parties that were involved, and unfortunately there was no chance of successful prosecution. Hence, that speaks to the need for this motion, and in fact, British Columbia and the RCMP and WorkSafe BC are working on, it's almost ready, I think it should be published very soon, a memorandum of understanding where those 3 parties will work together in the event of workplace fatalities.
One more question. When there is a workplace fatality and the labor and the police show up to investigate, if there's a decision to proceed with criminal code charges, there has to be a threshold at some point that it kicks in. And what I'm saying is,
that's correct.
They show up at a plant, this is the first accident, they don't lay criminal charges if it's the first accident and everything looked appropriate. They only consider laying charges if there was reckless disregard in an ongoing record where they did not act with diligence to fix the matter to provide safety for the employees, and that's that reckless disregard that raises the bar for a criminal proceeding.
That's correct. And if you look at the what the actual West Ray amendments state, that basically in brief, if a person with the duty to take all reasonable steps to prevent bodily harm to a worker fails to do so, and in failing to do so acts within wanton or reckless disregard for the life and safety of the worker, then that person is guilty of criminal negligence under Section 219 of the Criminal Code. And then obviously, West Ray Amendment and criminal negligence charges should follow.
Yeah, I want to thank you for lobbying in the manner that you are, because it's clearly educating, but it's shining a light on the decision makers, because as you know, there's someone that's making a decision, no, we're not going to do this, and they go away. But there has to be a more transparent process so we understand why they didn't choose to pursue. So.
That's correct. And Councillor Clark, Hamilton has we have a really strong supportive community in regards to health and safety of workers. And we have a beautiful monument out front where we pay honor and respect to all the workers that have been injured or lost their lives as a result on the job. And I mean, this campaign is, I'm saying this motion, I shouldn't say campaign, it's our campaign, but it's clearly a motion asking for education and training and in coordination of regulators and authorities. But Hamilton has that reputation for being concerned about a healthy and safe community for all. And I think that passing this motion not only helps the proper authorities and regulators do their job and get them adequate support, but it also is in line with Hamilton's vision and initiative for promoting a safer and healthier workplace for all citizens. And I know that our council clearly believes in that because, I mean, even with the example of sending councillors down to Stellarton, Nova Scotia to participate in the 20th anniversary, I can tell you, although I'm from Hamilton, I represent Ontario and Atlantic Canada and as a national rep, but Hamilton is really well respected, and specifically when that event occurred, the community and the government and the people of those 26 workers, the family members and the loved ones that lost their loved ones were so honored and appreciative of Hamilton and their respect and support for workplace safety.
When Hamilton acts, others...
They do. They certainly do. Now, to be honest with you, we were getting this motion in place. We've made applications to many municipalities, and every municipality has a different process as to how you get your opportunity to present before the leaders of the community. And, we are very thankful that Hamilton is one of the first, that we were hoping it would be the first, being that we are all Hamiltonians here. But, what I honestly believe, regardless of how you feel about, I know because we're a union and we're presenting it, there could be that image that, oh, well, it's the unions, but it doesn't matter. This is about people dying, and I cannot believe that there would be anybody in our country that is in a position of leadership in the community and in the province that would not support such a request.
I'm a former progressive conservative labor minister. I understand and agree with what you're saying.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful.
Okay, now, next on the speakers list is Councillor Pearson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sylvia and team. First and foremost, I have to say that, yes, I'm married to a steel worker from U.S. Steel, former Stelco, 35 years retired, and watching the video, I can tell you that when he was in the machine shop, it wasn't so worrisome, but when he went out to the caster, every day, I went, don't tell me what you did. When I get the call, I'll deal with it, because that's what you live every single day. And I don't want to get emotional about it, but it is something that sticks in your heart, and you know what every family person goes through that could have a spouse or a family member in that situation. So I appreciate you being here today, fully supportive of this. And I just wanted to touch on, because you mentioned this is actually just an education and it's coordination. So I appreciate the level of this. This is most imperative, that we get the right people knowing how to deal with this and what they need to include in their views and their examinations and studies and everything else. Absolutely, from the Crown attorneys to the health and safety reps. But do we take it down lower to the level of the companies, the workers? Are they not so much educated, but are they informed? And the reason I say this is, do the workers know when they go in the lunchroom that this law exists, that these are situations that you have the right to put requests forward for something to be looked at? Or do they have to worry about, the whistleblower sort of law, that their job may be in jeopardy? I know it's intense.
No, that's actually a really good question. And Darren, did you want to come in on this too? Just so you know, the question you posed is very important. And it also comes to, I think it's important that when you as community leaders or others support this, We are not saying that every corporation out there is responsible for workplace fatalities and that they should be charged. That is not at all what this is about. We're saying that in the event of criminal negligence and that they fall under, that the actual negligence falls under the Westray amendments, that people should be held accountable. It's no different than drunk drivers if somebody dies in our home, the police will come in and they do a criminal investigation. So workplace fatalities and the workers that are seriously injured or die deserve that same respect and treatment, that there's an investigation through a criminal lens. And as far as employers, there's some excellent employers out there that have fantastic health and safety programs that are constantly, updating their education for their employees, their machinery and equipment. They're doing wonderful inspections. And unfortunately, there's ones that are not doing that, and they are not adhering to the Occupational Health and Safety Act and the standards that are required, including regulations, depending on the sector. And the sad reality is, when we've seen so far only 10 prosecutions, of which 3 were successful under the criminal code and all 3 ended in fines, it's not a deterrent. It's a cost of doing business in some extent, and there needs to be if just one CEO or individual, whomever they may be, were criminally charged and spent one night in jail, there certainly would be a paradigm shift in the health and safety culture in our cities, our provinces, and our country. And I think that, Councillor Pearson, we would have employers that are not following health and safety legislation and procedures. They will straighten out immediately because there's consequences to actions. And I'm going to let Darren just comment on this as well, because Darren has an enormous amount of experience in this.
I work for ArcelorMittal, not the Fasco, but where the old Stelwire plant was part of Stelco back before 2005. ArcelorMittal, U.S. Steel, any of the major corporations, you open up a flyer and their safety is number one. That's what they say. They do, at ArcelorMittal, we have something that's called a journey to zero, and that means a journey to zero accidents. We have monthly safety meetings. We have an active health and safety committee. We do all the right things, yet when somebody calls the Ministry of Labour to put in an anonymous call or something, there's sometimes some kickback. And what we're looking for really is to make workplaces safer. This isn't about throwing somebody in jail. This is about having that possibility there so that our workplaces are safety, so that when we make a complaint to our employer, to our supervisor or manager, that they're taken serious and that we get the problems rectified in a much quicker manner. The almighty dollar. And we want the corporations that have the mantra that safety is job one to live it. And we believe that your help will get us there.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearson. Next on the list, we have Councillor Whitehead, then Jackson.
Thank you for coming. I worked very closely with Homer Siga that was instrumental in getting changes in the mining industry based on epidemiology studies, the high rise of cancer and silicosis in the uranium mines in Northern Ontario. So I certainly appreciate how things have evolved to try and protect workers. But I'm going to give you there's going to be a question, but I need to give you an example, a real life experience. I was a surveyor in a mine. I went into a heading. It's a big cavernous heading, surveying the heading. The back started to crack loudly. We grabbed our equipment and ran. We went on surface and reported it. Of course, they have engineering. They could record it. In that heading, they had a piece of a long hole drill, $250,000 piece of equipment. To send Roger, a friend of mine, to go get the equipment. The back came down. It took a week to get to what was remaining of Roger. So clearly the mine knew, because it was reported, that it was unsafe. And yet they sent an individual in there to save a $250,000 piece of machinery. So I certainly appreciate and understand where we're going. The first question I have is the right to refuse work. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one thing to ensure that employers are held accountable. But the other side of that coin is to ensure that their rights are given to workers that identify a safety issue. In an example of Roger's case, and the reason why I told the story, he knowingly, or he didn't know, but if he knew that the back was that bad, he would have had the right to say no and not get punished for saying no and refusing to go into the heading. Do we have enough strength in our legislation to ensure that workers are forced to be put in unsafe positions?
You know what, Councillor Whitehead, you make some extremely good points, and I am aware of the work and the history of you with Homer Seguin and Elliott Lake and your advocacy for safer workplaces and healthier and safer communities. No, yes, there is a right to refuse unsafe work, and is our legislation strong enough? I don't think it is. My colleagues here could certainly add to that, but the problem with it is that although there's right to refuse unsafe work, there are consequences to people and workers that refuse the unsafe work. And by the time the actual process is worked through and determined whether or not there was a justified reason to refuse unsafe work, workers are later, they suffer consequences for reporting health and safety infractions. And, we all know how, difficult it is to keep and maintain a good, well-paying job with benefits, and especially in an economy where we've lost an awful lot of jobs due to the economic crisis and, the manufacturing sector. So there's a lot of pressure on workers not to report things, not to be the whistleblowers, and to just, do your job. We've been doing it all along. Nothing's happened. It'll be fine. Just move on. And unfortunately, our legislation needs to have stronger teeth and enforcement and support for anyone that refuses unsafe work. And they shouldn't be penalized by way of losing their job or losing pay. And then furthermore, there's consequences of that after the fact in the workplace, how you're treated and the types of jobs that you could be all of a sudden sent to do, which is all retaliatory often. So, the right to refuse is really good. The problem is having proper enforcement and procedures and protocols where nobody is penalized. Darren, did you want to add anything to that?
Just that the inspectors, unfortunately, they don't have the power to come back and go after the company quite often. Most times with work refusal is put in and it's dismissed by the employer. People get sent home, and there's supposed to be a procedure. You do work refusal, you get your rep, they're supposed to bring you your rep, you discuss the situation, you try and resolve it, and there's steps that further go on. But what we hear quite often is that people just get sent home. You refuse? Okay, go home. So the guy's owed money. Well, the guy's only going to be owed so much money before he can't pay his rent or his mortgage. So they back down on that. And I've done a number of high school presentations on health and safety, and I can tell you, talking to the kids that are 16, 17, and 18 years old that are working in the car washes or at McDonald's or the Dairy Queen, they're afraid. They're afraid to ask the questions. They're afraid to stand up to their boss, and they're afraid to put in a work refusal. They want their jobs, and that's what it all comes down to. They want their jobs, right?
So, and I appreciate that, but I felt I better highlight that piece as well, because other people will come and say, well, we need to do this when workers can refuse. You just clearly articulated that it's great in principle, but in practice is not, and it doesn't work.
That has to be another lobbying campaign for us.
Actually, touching on the younger workers and the new workers that go out into the workplace, that was a comment that a question was posed by Sudbury City Council. One of the councillors asked about the training for young workers. They were concerned that they have young kids going out into the workforce and they're not getting the basic health and safety training that they would require, and specifically, Councillor Whitehead, to to the right to refuse, the right to know. And what was made very clear is that, unfortunately, even in our Ministry of Education policies in the curriculum, there is not mandatory health and safety training for all students. It is specific to, if you're in a co-op, if your child is in a co-op, then they will get some health and safety training. And our union has a program called the Young Worker Awareness, or the New Worker Awareness training that Darren speaks to, and we volunteer and will go into any school in any city and any community and deliver this program, letting the kids know of their rights and responsibilities, and understanding the workplace environment that they're going into. And sadly, as Darren pointed out, they are afraid, and rightfully so, because of the way the employers are not respecting, and I don't mean all employers, some employers are not respecting the legislation, and they're not putting their kids through training, health and safety training, and saying, listen, if you see a problem, don't be afraid. You come and tell me right away, and we will rectify that. And kids, unfortunately, are afraid, and, you know, they're going into the workforce. And there is a high number of injuries among the youth. And furthermore, that same attitude takes place in many workplaces where workers are afraid, because, as Darren said, they can send you home if you refuse. And while the process is being invoked, somebody's home, they're losing days' pay, and they have children and, you know, a wife or bills to pay, and they just can't make it. So there's that culture of risk-taking in some cases because the lack of education and support in the workplace.
And I appreciate that. And I guess just the last piece is I want to thank the steelworkers on the international side. I remember meeting with Wayne, who went to occupational health, was invited by the labor force in South Africa, and he came back, and I remember talking to him, and he said, Terry, they do not, from the statistic point of view, and deaths, they don't record African black individuals that were dying in the mines. It was only the whites that they're recording. He said it was just absolutely incredible. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Whitehead, we now have Councillor Jackson and Ferguson. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Nice to meet you, Sylvia, and your team of men there behind you, good leaders and advocates. I had a little taste, before just a couple of quick questions to help me further understand your campaign. I had a little taste back in the late 70s of dangerous workplace, and that to help pay my way through school, worked a couple of summers in the coke ovens at Dofasco. I was a door cleaner, and taught me workplace lessons and life lessons as well. So I got a little flavor for how dangerous a workplace can be. So Sylvia, let me just understand, before the West Ray Amendment, only the owner of the company or the CEO could potentially be charged under the criminal code, and the West Ray Amendment made it that any manager, supervisor, foreman, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to help me understand that a little better, please.
Sylvia?
That's correct.
Okay. Secondly, just curious, it's been 10 years since House of Commons unanimously acclaimed the amendment. Is it because the USW and others have tried to have faith in the criminal justice system that your campaign has begun just in the last, I'll say the last few months, late last year into this year, that you're making your way across municipalities and provinces? Or am I missing something? Or again, was it just a hope that the amendments would lead to what they were intended to be? I'm just trying to understand the timing of your campaign at this time, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you, please.
Sylvia?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jackson. There's certainly, our campaign, there is certainly hopes. There have always been hopes since the West Ray amendments were passed that if somebody was criminally negligent and responsible for workplace deaths or serious injuries, that there would be accountability. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened. Although the West Ray amendments have been utilized, they've been slowly utilized by prosecutors. And what came to fruition was when we went went back to Stellarton, Nova Scotia on the 20th anniversary, there were family members that were there, and they spoke to Councillor Deval and Darren Green, myself, and other directors and politicians that were there. And you have to remember that that happened 20 years ago, so there would be widows, and then they would have their children that were like 22, 23 years of age. And we had 2 young women specifically and a young man come up to us and say, you know, we're really thankful for the Steelworkers campaign and lobby in regards to Westray, and we're thankful for the governments that support it. But what's happened? Why is nobody being held accountable? Why did my father have to die? Why, as of yet, has not one single individual been accountable the way they would if you killed somebody on the street? Why is it okay to kill somebody in the workplace? And these people, when they said it, I mean, Councillor Deval would recall that. And that's what we had a discussion after all of the politicians were there, including at that time it was Premier Darrell Dexter, who's no longer obviously in office, but he himself said, you know, a lot of valid points were made. And the reality is, after speaking to many regulators, authorities, and whatnot, it became abundantly clear that there seems to be this huge disconnect and lack of knowledge and coordination and sharing of information and working together and training. So it led us as steelworkers to say, we made a promise and commitment, as did, many politicians, that there would be no more Westrays. So we decided that the campaign is clearly something that, why is it not happening? Why are the Westray amendments not being utilized more and effectively? And it was determined that there seems to be this big disconnect and lack of coordination, and there needs to be education, training, and direction. There has to be clear lines of direction from the top down and clear lines of investigation programs and prosecution. So that's kind of what led to our campaign. So although we are directing our campaign at the justice makers who are responsible for administration and justice in the provinces, specifically the Attorney General. We are also feel that it's important to meet with the heads of prosecution and the police organizations, from the associations to the chiefs of police, and the very important community leaders that you all are, because we need support from our community leaders to get the provincial government to implement this type of training and apply the Westray amendments in the event of workplace fatalities.
So it sounds like you almost reached a threshold where enough is enough, and you said, that's it, we need to take some action and make people more aware.
That's absolutely correct, and that's how we feel, like enough is enough, and hence our campaign is called Stop the Killing, Enforce the Law. We have a law, it's just not being enforced.
And you've referenced drunk driving, domestic violence, so I guess eventually, ideally, you'd love to get this issue elevated to that level, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Sylvia?
Yes, it should be. This issue, a workplace, serious workplace injury and fatality, should be looked at through a criminal lens and through criminal accountability. If it's determined that there is none, that's wonderful. Absolutely, then hand it over to the health and safety regulators and then let them do their work and look at laying charges under the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
Okay, fair enough. And ironically, Mr. Deputy Mayor, didn't the company win some award, some national or corporate award, a month or so before this tragedy happened, Sylvia?
That's absolutely correct, Councillor Jackson. And during that time frame, they received this national award for wonderful health and safety programs, which touches to the concerns and the question that Councillor Pearson had asked about safety and training in the workplace. And they received this award, and then a month later, there's an explosion and 26 workers are killed. And there was a record of ongoing health and safety complaints and concerns in the workplace, yet they received this award. Many years later, after the Westray law came into effect, that award was obviously taken away, but that is tragic and, incomprehensible. And Justice Richards made a comment about the wanton, reckless disregard for human life. And unfortunately, these kinds of things happen all over. And sadly, because of the global economy, we have large corporations, global corporations that are doing business in our country, which is great. We want work. We want people working and we want the economy to be booming, but some of those corporations have different health and safety standards and laws that they apply in third world countries. And they themselves, come into our country and may not be so diligent or aware of our health and safety laws and practices and procedures. And then there's that kind of culture in the workplace where the right to refuse, people are afraid to exercise it because of consequences.
Good luck with your campaign. It has my support. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. We have Councillor Ferguson next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Sylvia. I'm sorry I missed the start of your presentation. I was trapped on the 403. But I was pleased to hear you say that not all employers are bad.
Absolutely not.
That's important to note. I think a number of employers work very hard. I know I ran a large company with about 850 employees as a CEO, and I tell you, not only was I petrified of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but she had a duty to make sure every employee got home at night. And we had 4 people full-time in health and safety. Every management meeting, first item on the agenda was health and safety. We had weekly tailgate meetings where curriculum were sent out to foremen, and they're required to have every employee signed that they received that tailgate training. And I just want to turn the tide on you a bit, though, about work refusal. I mean, the manager of health and safety reported directly to me. I didn't want anything skewed coming to me or filtered. I wanted to hear it straight from them. But one thing I'd like to know where the steelworkers sit on this is, if we caught an employee, repeatedly, there's progressive discipline, who wouldn't work safely, they wouldn't tie off, because in the construction industry and highways, you're up high, you're down deep, you're working around utilities, traffic, airplanes, and so it'd be progressive discipline. But if someone wouldn't tie off, for example, or walking across a bridge with no railing, we would send them home and say, you're going home for 2 days. And the next time you're sending home for 5 days. Unions have a duty to represent.
Yes.
And those employees would file grievances that this wasn't reasonable. Now, you don't do this lightly. There's witnesses that would confirm that, yep, he did that. Now, none of them would progress to the board because it all gets settled. Where do the steelworkers sit if an employee tries to use progressive discipline to enforce health and safety? Would you, in fact, file a grievance against the employer if the person asked you to do that, and your duty to represent, even though there was other members that witnessed it and saw that, yeah, he did go down the trench without protection, or wasn't wearing his personal protective equipment, or wasn't tying off?
That's a good question, and your comments are, I appreciate them, and you're right, and I'm glad you noted that we are not saying that all employers are negligent and responsible for workplace deaths. There's many good employers. If you don't mind, I certainly will comment on it, but we have 5 steelworkers from various workplaces in our community that have had experience with that exact question that you asked, and I know that Darren could certainly comment on that from his perspective as the as the Steelworker Area Council President, and then I certainly would comment on that, my own personal view and the Steelworkers' view in regards to health and safety.
Darren?
This happens. There's a real conflict for us here, and that's why we have a health and safety committee that's got a mandate to make sure that workers are kept safe, and we've got chief stewards and stewards who do the representation on the other end of it. I can tell you, and it's happened many times, that where a person has come to me and said, hey, I got suspended for not wearing my earplugs. Well, this is the 4th time this guy's been told that he hasn't been wearing his personal protective equipment. So what do you want me to do? You're not wearing your stuff. And it comes down to, we want that guy to be safe. If the guy's blatantly out there disregarding every safety rule, I mean, he's going to die at some point. We got to get it through them. We work with the companies quite often to get that message through, because we don't want anybody hurt on the job. But you're right, it does happen. If we file a grievance, It's very rare on a safety occurrence because it's just something that we agree with. I mean, as I've explained to my members, you know, I've grew up with these families with the Christmas parties and the Labor Day picnics and everything else, so I know their kids, I know their spouses. I want them home at safe at night. I've got a responsibility to their families as well. And it's a responsibility that I take seriously. And I would think that most
Okay, but the Act says you have a duty to represent.
Right.
Now, it says you must file a grievance on my behalf. Do you not have to do that?
I will take a grievance, but sometimes there's steps in a grievance too. There's a first step, a second step, a third step, maybe a fourth step, then there's an arbitration.
First time 1 day,
Right.
second time 3 days, third time 5 days,
Yep.
fourth time termination.
Yeah.
And so you follow that progressive discipline on it. And but you have a duty, do you not, by law, to file a grievance an employee has to and defend that position?
As long as I'm not being malicious in my reasons for not taking something to arbitration, or I'm covered. We make decisions based on what's good for the employee, what's good for the union, and for our membership. And we have to show all our membership that health and safety, we take it seriously. So yeah, we'll take a grievance. How far it will go, we don't know. Will it go to arbitration on a health and safety grievance? Probably not.
Do you not need the Labor Relations Act to be amended to give you the right to not take a grievance on health and safety?
I don't believe we do. No. No. We've got a grievance procedure, and it's ultimately when it gets to a grievance, it's a grievance committee that will decide through that committee whether to proceed with a grievance or not. And it can be dropped at any time.
Because most supervisors don't like to get grievances. They like to, I think, have a good working relationship with their crews.
Yes.
If they find they're being grieved and criticized, they're going to be reluctant to take that discipline.
People grieve for a lot of reasons. And one of the reasons is just to show that they're angry. They know that they messed up, but I'm mad that I got sent home, so I'm going to file a grievance. Even though I tell them, hey, you weren't wearing your seatbelt, you weren't doing this, you weren't doing that.
Safety glasses.
So what do you want me to do? You weren't doing it, and they've got witnesses. What do you want?
Okay, I've made my point.
And I'll say 9 times out of 10 it doesn't result in a grievance because we can talk to the guy and make him understand.
It's just the chronic guys that go on and on.
No, absolutely.
Councillor Ferguson, sorry. I employed at Hamilton Specialty Bar, formerly Slater Steel. And I mean, if a worker is disciplined for health and safety reasons, if he wants to put in a grievance, I mean, obviously it's his own disregard for health and safety, but it's also the workers around him. So, I mean, we wouldn't pursue it. We have a third step grievance meeting that competent people sit down and talk about it, and it wouldn't go any farther. If I could just add that.
And your question about the duty, yeah, we do have a duty. And if somebody files a grievance, then we have a responsibility to look into it and proceed with the various stages. And we advise our members, you know, if we feel that their grievance has no merit and is wrong and that they were in error themselves, and we make recommendations to them. And sometimes, like Darren said, or Mike, we may not proceed further if we feel that there clearly is no valid to continue, and members may be upset with us because they feel we have to continue on the you know, the grievance at all stages and go to arbitration. And you know, there could be complaints that we didn't represent them fairly, but if in fact it gets to the stage of arbitration, the arbitrators rule on the facts and whether or not there was merit and whether or not who was at fault, whether it was the union, the employer, the worker, etc. But we do have a duty, and it's common sense prevails, right? Like, you're going to tell somebody, listen, you know, you weren't wearing your safety goggles, or you weren't doing this, and you were not following procedure, and you got disciplined and sent home. And like Darren says, well, what do you want me to do about it? You were wrong.
Okay, I think I've made my point.
Does that answer?
The only part that worries me is that, from my experience, the supervisors won't discipline because they don't want that go through that aggravation. So they turn their eyes the other way.
I can clearly tell
and so
you
we
that
coach them and coach them and coach them. Don't. And if there's a grievance, we will handle it at head office. But they were proud of the fact that they didn't have any grievances. And when these pop up because they're trying to do the right thing. Anyhow, I've made my point. I won't take any more time. And the last thing, I support your resolution too, because there's a lot. These 4 people full-time health and safety costs $500,000 a year. That's a lot of money. And if my competitor's not doing it, it's an advantage he has in a very competitive world. And so there needs to be consequences if there is gross negligence, so I support your.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. And, you know, one point when we talk about business, there's that other side of it. When there's workplace injuries and people are off work and they're on workers' compensation benefits or weekly indemnity benefits because of their workplace injury, we all know that our country, there's over $50 billion a year that is spent on absenteeism from work due to workplace illnesses, injuries, and it's affecting our insurance systems. And the reality is if health and safety practices were followed and adhered to in all workplaces and there was proper training and enforcement and education, we would not have as many workplace injuries and these statistics that we have today.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. We have no further speakers, I don't believe, but if I could just pass the chair over to Councillor Whitehead. Sylvia, many thanks for the presentation, and just to try to deduce what the main points of the presentation really are. From my perspective, what I'm hearing is that we have a law in place, and it's not so much the actual enforcement of the law, but the prosecution of it from the Attorney General's perspective. Is that correct?
Well, yes, except there is an enforcement part of it, Councillor Marilla, because it's not being enforced through the lens of the criminal code and accountability.
Excellent, and which brings me to my next point. So when somebody calls 911, through you, Mr. Chairman, and someone is dead at a scene, you feel there's an inequality in the way the police and the prosecution deal with it versus that of the general public. So if 911 is called, someone is dead at the scene at work, they acted differently from a procedural standpoint than they would if someone did that in the middle of Main Street.
Yes, and that's where it comes into that looking at the workplace fatalities and serious injuries through a criminal lens. So they secure the scene, they conduct a criminal investigation if somebody's killed on the street or if there's a drunk driver, and they look at it through a criminal lens and determine if charges should be laid. Whereas in workplace fatalities, although the police go there and they do their job and then away they go, they pass it off over to the health and safety regulators and then they carry on with business. And it's not looked at through a criminal lens.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, hence the importance of it being looked upon as through a criminal lens, right, so that the deterrence from a legal perspective is more prevalent. Because at present,
that's correct,
without the enforcement and the convictions, it really acts in no way as a deterrent to those that might want to circumvent the legislation. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so just to bring it back to where I think the thrust of this initiative is, that's what it's all about. We're seeking equality in life and in death, and meaning we strive for equality through you, Mr. Chairman, in so many ways for a workplace environment. But in death, we're failing miserably, locally, provincially, and nationally, and all we're asking for is that equality. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes, and when you think about it, it's about accountability too. There's accountability for one's actions, and if you knowingly and wantonly, recklessly have disregard for human life, and you don't abide by health and safety practices and standards that are legislated, there has to be accountability and consequences. Why are we held accountable for what we do outside of work, whether it's drunk driving or if there's an assault on the street? These things are all looked at through a criminal investigation and through a criminal lens, and then it's determined whether or not it warrants negligence and criminal charges. And that should happen when workers are seriously injured or killed at work, and that's what's not been happening, unfortunately.
So So, through you, Mr. Chairman, and hence, we're looking at equality in life and in death, as well as the enforcement of the law to provide deterrence in order to provide accountability. And that basically sums it up. And most importantly, from my perspective, and I'll elaborate more under comments, is the fact of honoring the death of a worker. We call frontline workers in police and fire and ambulance and so on heroes when they die at work, but we don't for the average worker. And for me, I think they should all be considered workers and bring it to the same level of honor. And so at the appropriate time, I will mention that, and I'll take back the chair, and I appreciate your time. May I have a motion to receive the presentation? Moved by Whitehead, seconded by Duval. All in favor? Carried. Now, Councillor Duval, you have a motion, and then I have a list of speakers. So, Councillor Duval.
Yes, we have a resolution in front of us, and I would like to move that,
Moved by Councillor Duval?
Yes.
And I'll second that, yes.
And you're going to second. Can I speak to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate our delegation coming out today. But for the audience, I know it's been a long morning on this issue, but it's to show you the seriousness of what happened. And basically, many accidents happened prior to the West Ray mine that were very, very neglectful on behalf of some of the people that were running the corporation. But West Ray was the one, the straw that broke the camel's back. And back in July in 1991, up in Stellarton, Nova Scotia, jobs were needed very, very bad. And they were all excited about the new mine that was going to open up. And they all felt great that they could go and support the families. At that particular time, the company, the private organization that was running it, was basically violating a lot of the procedures that would go on to make that mine safe. And in fact, Liberal Bernie Boudreau at that particular time sent a letter to the Nova Scotia Labour Minister, and his concerns were that the new mine that was scheduled to open in just 2 months is potentially one of the most dangerous in the world. He put that to the actual Labour Minister. 2 months after that, 500 people attended, and everybody was cutting their ribbons. A whole bunch of governments came, and it was just, they were all proud because 300 jobs were being created over a 15-year period. When the mine opened, there were serious accidents that were happening every day, and then the steel workers came in, and in March, because of the amount of complaints when they were organizing, and a person by the name of Mike Pichet said it very, very strongly out to the public that if something doesn't if corrective action isn't taken soon, he strongly feels that somebody's going to be killed in the near future. That was in March of 1992. 2 months later, a night shift went in, 26 miners, the mine blew up, 26 people were killed. They went to work just to earn money, and knowing that the incompetence that was happening and the intimidation that if they said anything, they were going to be fired and they can go home. It was a tragedy. There was an inquiry that happened because of the pressures, the public pressures that went on, that something has to be stopped. And one of those things that were stopped was there was a judge that led the inquiry, Peter Richard, and in his testimony, in his research, he found a mosaic of actions, omissions, mistakes, incompetence, apathy, cynicism, stupidity, and neglect. That was his comments after he did the inquiry. It was the worst thing that we've ever seen and that happened in Canada. The worst part about this is that when he did his inquiry, this is what's the title, A Predictable Path to Disaster. And this is where the actual corporation was named, and the concerns by the judge that the various government inspectors who ignored glaring safety abuses, among them inadequate ventilation design and maintenance that failed to keep methane and coal dust to safe levels. There also was problems about the unauthorized mine layout,
No jurisdiction, no permission, no nothing. It was forcing miners to work in risky tunnels to get the coal out faster. And he was basically, the corporation, saying, get in there and do the work, or go home and I'll get another person to do it. They thought human life were defective widgets, and that's how they used them. The most obscene thing I've ever heard of, there was detectors down there in the mines, methane detectors that would alarm the worker that when the ratio was too high, it was to get out and do something about it. You got to go get some fresh air. The company disconnected those actual pieces of equipment. And they did that purposely, so they wouldn't want to disrupt the coal production. So many inadequacies was done in there, and this is why it took this type of disaster that the steelworkers and many other unions went forward for 10 years and finally convinced the Canadian government that people have to be competent and responsible for their actions they take in a workplace. And I look at the audience here today and I see some children up there, and we're doing this to make sure that your children are safe when they go on, when there's their time to go to work. You go to work to make money, you don't go to work to die on the job. And people have to be responsible if this happens. Somebody has to pay the price, and we want to make sure that the awareness is out there, that there's no more just a great latitude, you know what, we can hide by the corporate shield. If you do it, you're responsible, and you're going to be called up upon it. So I fully support it. I ask this council to fully support it, and I thank again our delegation for doing such great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duval. We now have Councillor Clark, then Whitehead. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Marula, and I want to thank Councillor Duval for helping these folks come before us today on something that is, one would argue, the most pressing issue in Canada today. When Councillor Duval called me at home and we spoke about it, I was quite surprised that we're talking about a law that was brought into being and proclaimed 2004, and yet it's not being enforced today. And that was a little bit upsetting for me, because while I was the Minister of Labour, I really tackled young workers being injured on the job. And it's still crisis proportions today. We have not really moved forward enough. Between 2006 and 2011, 52,000 young people between the ages of 14 to 24 will be injured on the job, and 39 of them will be killed. And I supported this law even before it became into the law. Back in 2002, 2003, the ministers of labor were talking about making a law, federal, so that all provinces would follow it, that would enable Crown attorneys to proceed with criminal negligence charges. And it's not criminal negligence charges against any company that has a workplace injury. The criminal negligence charges are really, the Crown would only prosecute where there was a reckless disregard for life and safety, where there was a lack of duty of care, where there was actions without due diligence. That really means that you'd have to be an employer who was told that the elevator door won't close, and you were told every single day for 2 weeks, and then some poor person fell through the elevator shaft. That shows a very clear reckless disregard. So think about that. There are accidents like that occurring in Ontario today, and there are no charges criminally. The police show up, Ministry of Labour show up. Once the Ministry of Labour are there, and I made it jokingly earlier, but pretty much the police say, okay, you got this, and they walk away. So there's no forensics, there's no real investigation, Was it an accident, or did his buddy push him? No investigation into that. They treat it purely as a workplace accident. Labor Ministry makes decisions, recommendations in terms of how they can prevent it from happening again. There's a funeral and everything's forgotten, except for the workers who never forget. So it's a little bit disturbing that we're at this point and no one can really explain to me why the Crown Attorney is not involved and responding to an accident. Now, I recall a young person, 18 years of age, working in a bakery, worked there for 2 weeks. The investigation indicated that he was not given any safety manuals. His father told him that the machine that he was using, which was a large industrial dough-making machine, should have a guard on it. So the son spoke to the owner, and the owner says, no, it just gets in the way, just be careful. And he complained 3 times about it. 2 weeks later, his arm got caught in it, and it pulled him right in. And he died that morning in the bakery. That's reckless disregard for human life. No charges against the bakery. Another young person that I remember when I was there, and there are dozens of these stories I could tell you, and I had many sleepless nights because of this nonsense that was going on. His employer gave him a bottle and pointed to a barrel and said, I need some cleaning solvent. Pour the solvent into this container and then bring it to me. There was no explanations as to what the solvent was. There was no explanations about anything. He poured the solvent in, someone came in with a lit cigarette, and he was engulfed in flames and died standing over the bottle. That's reckless disregard for human life. And that's what we're talking about. The fact that the Crown Attorneys in the province of Ontario, and Mr. Chairman, I know many of them, they're good people. Someone has to give them the direction to prosecute. Someone has to say, look into these things and investigate. And they will. And they do a really thorough job. They're not being told to investigate. Now, I can tell you from my experience at Queen's Park, I found it fascinating that there was an organization that was dealing with residential care facilities, and the government was looking at bringing about regulations to make it tougher for RCFs and make it safer for the patients. Next thing you know, the RCF organization was holding large fundraisers for MPPs all over the province raising money. Do you think that legislation ever came to be? The legislation disappeared. Gone. I was the Minister of Transportation, I had issues with the driving education schools. And they started fundraising, and every fundraiser I went to, the driving education school chairperson was there with a host of compadres. And they were lobbying at these events. And while I'm writing the bill to create it, I'm being told by the Premier's office and the party to change the bill because it's too aggressive. It's going to cost the economy money. So the reason I'm saying this is there has to be a reason why a political party chooses not to say to your Crown Attorneys, start implementing this law. There has to be a reason why it's not done. It's not, oops, we forgot about it. And I'm afraid that the economy is what they're worried about, because all the fundraisers are saying, if you do this, you're going to kill companies. They need to understand, and the public needs to understand, that these laws do not kill the company. They go after and prosecute the one person who had control and command over that situation and
showed reckless disregard for life. So that one person, that one foreman, or that one board member, or those are the people that find themselves on the hook in a criminal charge. So it doesn't impact the economy. Actually, what it does is it makes the workplace a hell of a lot safer, which every statistic I've ever looked at shows the safe workplace means productivity goes up significantly. So I fully support what Councillor Duval is doing. I fully support what all these good people have taken the time to come down here and deal with. This speaks to the values of us as Canadians and Ontarians, and it crosses all party lines. Some of the people at the top of the parties may not like it because their fundraisers are saying this is a bad thing. Tell them to bugger off and enforce the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We have Councillor Whitehead now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I told the story about Roger, and I think it's important, not just on Roger, but the 1,000 workers that die every year, according to the information we have here, and certainly the West Ray. It behooves government to ensure that those families have a legacy. That legacy is a safer workplace, a right for individuals to go to work and to come home safely. Roger was an inspiring, very active in the community. I believe he was one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball in Canada, went to the Nationals 2 years in a row. He had a whole future in front of him. That future was robbed because of a piece of equipment worth $250,000. This is not about persecuting employers. We know that many employers are good employers. But when you take a look at our systems, whether you speed on the highway and get a ticket, you're held accountable. You're charged. Whether you drive recklessly, you're charged. There are many systems already in place to provide a healthy safety environment for the general public. Well, nothing should be less in the workplace. So certainly what is here before us, and certainly through my life experiences, is a part of that evolution. And I just mentioned to Councillor Duval when I was talking to him, what I'm finding, and I think it was sort of alluded to by Sylvia, there's third world type corporations coming in and buying companies in Canada. Inco was bought by a Brazilian company, if I recall. And I talked to some of the workers out of Sudbury about the environment and how the environment became much more conflict and health and safety issues became ignored. I don't think it's just unique to Valet, I think is the company. It's not just unique to Valet, but certainly there seems to be a different element, a different type of investor coming into this country trying to exploit or take advantage of workers. And I think it behooves us to ensure that the legislators are putting the proper tools in to hold employers accountable for workers in their lives when they place it in their hands when they go to work each and every day. So for those reasons, absolutely motherhood. If we could do more, we should do more, but this is a good start. I will be wholeheartedly supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Are there any further speakers? I have myself on the list. Just, I guess, to deduce all the information that we have received today, and I think what the presenters are truly amplifying and trying to expose is the fact that we do have a law, but that law, unfortunately, has not been enforced to the same level as it should be. And as a result, the prosecution hasn't followed suit. Neither have there been convictions. And when you look at the purpose of a law, the purpose of a law is to have a penalty that will provide deterrence, retribution, rehabilitation, and accountability. And none of that is happening right now. And the equality issue of someone dying on Main Street versus someone dying in a workplace, I think is concerning and disconcerting in the sense that if 911 is called for a death, I believe if someone dies in the workplace, it should be investigated as thoroughly as someone dying just on Main Street. And anything short of that, I think, is irresponsible. So, in conclusion, I think I strongly support what's before us in Councillor Duval's motion, and I had probably met with the group, with Councillor Duval, and working with this particular issue. And even knowing it superficially prior to that meeting, in discussing the issue, I never recognized really how glaring the inequality is between the Main Street and the work death is, until you look at the statistics. And even if you think of your own reaction to reading the paper, if you hear of somebody dying in the workplace, you generally say, wow, that was a terrible accident. But most accidents are preventable. So what can provide an environment conducive to preventing that death is a deterrent such as this particular law should be providing, and at present isn't. So as a result, I'm proudly seconding and supporting the motion that's before us, and I thank everyone for their involvement today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have Councillor Duval.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and just make this short. And I'm going to request a standing recording vote on this, but I just want to let the audience know and this council know that one thing I did miss out on is that when I said about the explosion happening, it was so massive that 2 nearby towns, the windows were shattered, and it just shook those towns. But out of those 26 miners, only 15 have been recovered. The other 11 are still in the ground, and it was so bad that they could never get them out of there. So just for information, thank you.
Okay, so on the motion, a standing recorded vote has been called. All in favor? I guess it could be recorded as unanimous. It's okay, Jim. Okay, moving on, we have now members of committee. Item 7.1 is a presentation of neighborhood action plans for Crown Point and Gibson Lansdale neighborhoods. I would call on Suzanne Brown, Manager of Neighborhood Action Strategy, to provide an introduction to the report and the speakers who will be presenting for their respective neighborhoods.
Good morning, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Mayor, and members of council. Thank you for taking time this morning to listen to 2 of our neighborhoods come and present their plans. As I was listening to the very thoughtful and sobering conversation that just happened in this room, obviously it takes us back to the health and safety issues that neighborhoods identify, but also I wasn't surprised when I heard that the contingent that spoke to you today was from Hamilton, because one of the things that I've learned the most in the neighborhood strategy is that Hamiltonians care about Hamilton and they care about their neighborhoods, and I think that you're going to really hear that today when you hear the presentation from our neighborhoods. So our Crown Point and our Gibson and Lansdale area neighborhood action plans are here today. The members of those planning teams are here today to present, and this makes actually the 9th and 10th neighborhood action plans to come before you in the last 2 years, and also is the end of the first 10 planning processes that we undertook in the neighborhood office. Our 11th neighborhood, we are currently in a beginning of a planning phase in Rollston. We've been doing some work up there with kids on a photo voice project in a partnership with Public Health, and we've been really engaging folks to talk about this idea of what a neighborhood action planning process is. It's very new to them up there, and they don't currently have a planning team, but we're in our very beginning stages of getting that happening. One of the things that we've discovered in the neighborhood action strategy is that engaging children in their and getting their opinions about their neighborhoods is very useful. It really does form a foundation for our neighborhood action plans, and we found it so useful in many of our schools and in Rollston, the Montcalm Community Housing Complex, that we've actually created a photo voice kit. So if you don't know what photo voice is, it's a way of gathering information that's actually fun and creative. It's not like doing, your Survey Monkey that we're all familiar with, or perhaps going to a focus group. It's actually about giving kids cameras and saying to them, in a supervised way of course, go out into your neighborhoods and take pictures of the things that you like and the things that you'd like to change, and let's talk about that. And we have really been very successful in engaging kids, and through kids their parents, in our planning processes in this. So one of the things we thought we should do was actually create a photo voice kit, because up till now we've been begging and borrowing cameras cameras and flip charts and display cases and all that, all those things from across the city and all our many partners in planning and community and emergency services. But we've now in the Neighbourhood Action Strategy Office put together a photo voice kit of all the items you would need to run this great process in any of the neighbourhoods or communities across the city of Hamilton. It will be finished by the end of February. It will be the second installment in our resource library, the first one being the Neighbourhood Action Planning Toolkit. And so we are trying to come up with ways that we can provide support across the city of Hamilton to groups who really do want to be engaged. So before I actually introduce the speakers who will present the Gibson and Lansdale area plans and the Crown Point plans, I'd actually like to call Brenda Duke and Tammy Hybert to the podium to talk a little bit about one of the key supporters for the neighbourhood strategy and for these neighbourhoods whose presence I think we sorely miss today in recognition of the work and support that Councillor Morelli has provided to them.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brenda, and I'm from Gibson and Lansdale area community planning team, or as we like to call it, GALA, because it's shorter. I want to share with you some of the ways that Councillor Morelli was a friend to our community. Bernie always showed his support for what we were trying to do. From bylaw blitzes to clean up the neighborhood to attending events and meetings, he made sure we had people to contact if we had issues. We asked for his support to give us credibility so that we could engage our neighbors, and he gave it to us 100%. It was like a family gathering anytime he visited an event or a meeting or just walked around the neighborhood. People wanted to talk to him, invite him for espresso, tell him what they needed, because they knew that he always listened and he always found a way to help. Bernie Morelli was an excellent example of what a community supporter should be, and he helped bring our neighbors together in Gibson and Lansdale. Thank you.
And my name is Tammy Hybert, and I'm with the Crown Point community. And as the Crown Point community, we likewise wanted to publicly acknowledge our deep appreciation for Councillor Bernie Morelli. It's true, I think actually Chris Murray may have said it, that when you walked out of his office, he would always say, "Let me know what else I can do for you." And he sincerely meant it. And you walked away knowing it wasn't a pat thing he said to get the vote or to make you feel good that you were heard, but he sincerely meant, tell me what I need to do to make that flourish because I want to be there for it. And so you walked out confidently knowing he got your back. Last year there were a series of Jane's walks, which are like locally run tours in the community, and he did one in Gage Park. And the people who were part of that tour were struck by his great history of Gage Park in the community and his great storytelling. He was it was the real man telling his story times of a kid in Gage Park, but also the real picking up girls kind of stories. So you know he's a real people's, yeah, see him, you're like, yeah, I know those stories too. Yeah, we got to hear them as well. So we just wanted to publicly, again, acknowledge that Crown Point deeply respected Councillor Bernie Morelli. All the work that he has done did not go unnoticed. It was highly valued. We know he tirelessly worked for many things, and he will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Okay. So without much further ado, and I know people have been waiting very patiently, I would like to introduce to you the speakers from the Gibson and Lansdale area, or GALA as they like to be called, which I think is a very great name, to come and talk to you about their neighbourhood plans. And they have a slideshow to show as well, so I'm going to tweak that in a minute as well. So I would like to introduce Jerry Cunningham, who is the chair of the Gibson and Lansdale Neighbourhood Association, along with Brenda, who just spoke very eloquently about Councillor Morelli, and Angela Eady as well, to talk to you about their neighbourhood plans and their neighbourhoods.
Good morning, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to appear today and give you a bit of information about what's happening in our neighbourhoods and hopefully walk away with your support. I'd like to tell you that the Gala Planning Community Team will engage community to create neighborhood where we can proudly live, work, and play. And that's sort of how we've, I guess, incorporated. That's our job description, and a rather large one. However, our team has met that head on. We have spent the last year coming up with a plan based on the priorities that were identified by people coming to our meetings and when we were out in the community. That plan is now in place, and I believe you have copies of it this morning, the 2014-2018 work plan. The planning team also established a framework from which we operate, and so our terms of reference was born and became our Bible to some degree. Through the relationship with Mission Services and support from the Hamilton Community Foundation, we've now established an office at the Mission Services building on Wentworth, sort of our headquarters. Gala has designed a custom-made system in which to prepare, produce, and distribute the Herald Community newspaper. That paper has been functioning now for approximately a year, and we again want to acknowledge the Hamilton Community Foundation for their initial grant, which helped us get things moving forward. The paper has had a phenomenal effect, and when I walk into meetings just after one of our issues have come out, I often notice that our numbers are up and all kinds of new faces, so we're convinced that that is a really very effective tool for us. The project, and we're very proud to tell you, that is now totally self-sustaining. We appreciate, as I say, the grant, and we use that to position ourselves, and I think we've accomplished our goals there. Members also have mobilized to deal with our immediate environment. Parks is one of the issues that we look at pretty carefully. There was a sort of a unused space. It's been turned into a green space, and it's been used pretty often, and I think often very well in our area. Our group has also adopted Powell Park, and we're just sort of on the threshold of that project, beginning when if the snow ever stops.
That doesn't look good.
No. It's hard to talk about parks when you look out that window. As of the first annual general meeting, which we held in the fall, our action teams were moved forward, and the Neighbourhood Action Work Plan is now a breathing and living entity. People came up to the, met the mark, I guess, and decided that they were interested in certain programs, and thus the committees were born. So we have a pretty active group right now, and we're pleased to say so. The volume of work, I come from a corporate world, and where sometimes things become slow and cumbersome. I'm amazed at the accomplishments of our group. A group of volunteers who really have demonstrated grit and determination. They want to move ahead, and they are. I think there's lots of evidence of that. In a year, we've accomplished things that a corporation would be envious of, I'm sure. The contributions from the Hamilton Community Foundation have been invaluable, and we will always be in their debt. We wanted to make special note of that because they certainly have been our foundation as well. We have members of our team here today who would like to share with you their experiences and details on the work that has been ongoing and part of Gala. And with that, I will turn things over to Brenda, or I'm sorry, Angela.
Angela or Brenda? Brenda first.
Welcome, Brenda.
Thank you. I'm going to tell you that the Birch Avenue green space is basically my backyard. So when I moved to Gala about 4 years ago, I noticed that it was neglected, it was overrun with weeds, and often it was a meeting place for undesirable activity. I decided that before it got too bad, we were going to take it back to our neighborhood. And I was lucky to find the Gala team, and they helped me organize the cleanup, and we inspired others to join us. So working with neighbors, businesses, friends, and the Adopt a Park program, the green space belongs to the neighborhood again. And the neighborhood are the ones who water, weed, plant. They sit on the benches that the city provided us. and they always want to have something in the green space. So we held a garden party last May, and that attracted over 100 people, and a community picnic in August brought out even more families from the neighborhood. And what was really encouraging about that was that it was a starting point, and it inspired people to say, I want to do that on my corner, or I want to do that in my park. And they began to care about property standards and illegal dumping. And the city got involved, and they helped us with bylaw enforcement, and they helped us maintain the parks and the alleys and the green spaces that we were taking care of. We have clean teams organized and formed in the area, and they inspect their alleys and streets regularly. They keep them clean, and when things get too bad, then they call bylaw. And we've seen significant improvements with the alleys and the property standards. I was told one time that the alley on Fullerton Avenue was one of the worst alleys in Hamilton, and we lost that claim to fame. So I think that's a good point. Just this past fall, we were granted funding, and we purchased 2,000 daffodil and tulip bulbs. We donated those, gave them out to the residents in the area, and asked them to plant them in Gala. So if the snow ever stops, we're going to see lots of daffodils and tulips in Gala. As Jerry mentioned, we also adopted Powell Park, and our goal is to make it a safe, clean place for families and children to come again. And we just want that to be an extension of the great work that Powell Park Community Garden has already started in the neighborhood. We've also formed the action teams: alley and laneway improvement, adopt a park, green space beautification, bylaw education. I guess you can sort of tell where my interest lies. We work with bylaw and parks, and our goal is to educate and bring people on board to continue to improve their neighborhoods. The Herald that Jerry spoke about was a project that we started last May in 2013 with a team of about 4 people who didn't necessarily have any experience, but we had a mission to get the news out there to the community residents. Since then, we've grown to a team of about 15 people, and we have 5,500 newspapers that are delivered by our volunteers to residents and businesses in the area. Businesses want to advertise with us, and that supports us financially. And we can say confidently now that our financial base closely matches the amount that Hamilton Community Foundations granted us. I think that we've made great strides in over a year, but as always, there's still plenty of work to be done. Gala has many assets, and we'd like to bring even more people on board to build on them. Our goal is to improve Gala one corner and one project at a time, but for that to happen, we do need your support. Thank you. Angela?
Thank you, Brenda. Angela?
One thing became clear as Gala residents met to discuss their neighborhood. We are keen to recognize and build on the strengths and gifts that we are discovering about each other and our neighborhood. It's easy to fall prey to negative stereotypes and perceptions, which just leads us to throwing up our hands and saying, what's the use? And that's why we're grateful to the Hamilton Community Foundation and to the city for developing neighborhood strategies using asset-based community development. It's what excites and motivates us. We can now focus on how each person can contribute his or her particular skill, talents, and knowledge. And it also helps make the work sustainable because people are doing what they love and what they're good at. Here is a short list of people assets that we have uncovered during the 18 months we've been working together. In Gala, we have people with business skills, social workers, teachers, landscapes, gardeners, artists, writers, and people who can only be described as incredible community connectors. Individual residents have used their networking skills to start conversations with business owners and agencies, and it's this building of relationships that has helped make our newspaper sustainable and to help us develop this strong working relationship with Mission Services. What's more, relationships among the different people on our teams have contributed to a great sense of community. Some of us work and spend our days outside the neighborhood. A big change in the last 18 months is that we now know people whose houses we can walk to. We not only recognize faces on the street, but we know their names. And those whose names we don't know, we wish to connect with so we can share about what Gala is doing. Asset-based community development has a great way of snowballing. And so Jerry will make some final comments.
Thank you. I've not had the privilege of knowing any of the council on a personal level or a one-to-one. But I can tell you that I don't get excited too easily about too much. That's just the way it is. I'd be a great poker player, I think. However, I am excited about what's happening with Gala. I never miss an opportunity at our meetings to relate that to our membership. And certainly, when I'm telling them I appreciate what they do and I'm amazed at the volume of work that we can get done and progress we can make, I do that with all sincerity. You've had, just through this very brief presentation, you've had a glimpse, I guess, of who we are and our commitment and certainly our sincerity. And we certainly hope that we can count on your support going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have questions now. Mayor Bettina.
Thank you for the presentation, and I hope that one of the things that will happen as Gala moves forward is that someone will begin to collect the stories of the neighborhood, because I'm familiar with a lot of them. My wife grew up at near Barton and Gibson. In her early years, she taught at Tweedsmuir. Her mother lived on Fullerton. One of the interesting aspects of the neighborhood is so diverse. The Armenians had an Armenian hall on Princess Street, and so and the Polish community was prominent, and the Italian community, and so on. There used to be a slaughterhouse at Wentworth Street north, where the city yard is. That was the Fearman's slaughterhouse. And on it goes. There's so many prominent people and great stories that have occurred in the neighborhood. And I think that one thing, Mr. Deputy Mayor, that brings a neighborhood to life is its history. So perhaps we could work on something like that in collecting those stories. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that Mission Services, it's very interesting how they got that building, because they had 50 Murray Street, and I told them, we're going to build a GO station there. The value of that property is very high. Why don't you sell it and see if there's a more appropriate, better building? And so they did. And they ended up, and it's a delight to see how well the integration of that building is with the neighborhood, because there were some issues. People had some concerns, right? Well, look at it. It's a monumental building. There's so much good activity, and you're functioning in that building as well. So what I would say is that this neighborhood is easy to overlook and say, well, that's the part where we just zip by and don't look there. It's the bones of that neighborhood are phenomenal. You have Gary Santucci with his Pearl Company and all those wonderful things. So congratulations, but keep in mind, somehow we need to archive and tell the whole story as it goes back to when those houses were originally built. And those would be my comments, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to receive the presentations? Moved by Pearson, seconded by Powers. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much to the Gibson and Lansdale folks. And now we have the Crown Point planning team. I'd like to bring Tammy Hebert forward to talk about the Crown Point plan. You can see Crown Point folks in purple, all of those very well-behaved children. I must say, as a parent, I am very impressed at how well-behaved the children are from Crown Point. And anyway, I think that Tammy has a cast of supporting members in her presentation. So without further ado, the Crown Point planning team.
So hello again. Yes, proud resident of the Crown Point community, and like Gala, we wanted to give you just a taste of who we are, some of the things that we've been doing and where we're heading. And I think actually, you can't say any better than Gala how they've expressed just the important connection with the city, the support that we get from councillors, and that network that we're moving towards, really building on community initiatives. We're grateful for that. So I won't be able to put words better than Gala did, so thanks for that, guys. And I'm excited that you get to hear just flavors of what's happening in different portions of the city, because really there's some really great stuff happening, some cool stuff happening. You're not going to be able to sleep tonight because you'll be dreaming of all the things that will be happening in your community, and that's okay because you can come next year and tell us about that. But to give you the context, Crown Point is between Gage Avenue and Kenilworth. If you're standing on the escarpment and looking towards the water, Gage is on your left, Kenilworth's on your right, and right in between that is chock full of tons of assets. And if we had more people who didn't get snowed in, we would have done a visual map for you of Gage Park in the corner and Crown Point, or the Pipeline Trail kind of running diagonally across. We've got a thriving business district on Ottawa Street, and if you walk into the Cannon, it's like Cheers. You walk in and they say your name, hey, Councillor Morelli or Councillor Marula. And so you can walk in there and you feel like you're just part of the crowd. You're becoming to know one another as neighbors. We have the YWCA and the Boys and Girls Club and churches and popcorn. Anybody else? Okay. Lots of assets in there, and we can only give you a taste of it. If you want to know more, you've got to come and visit us. But to get to know a little bit of what we've been doing in the last 5 years as we've been forming, we've really just kind of started as a neighborhood planning team. Right now I'm co-chair of the planning team in Crown Point, and it's been neat to see just how people begin to form around great ideas. And we've had things like Property Elves, which is kind of like the property maintenance program that was going on, where neighbors are helping neighbors paint a house or fix a deck, and it really builds community. We've had soccer, which Tim is going to talk a little bit about. That was something that Councillor Bernie Morelli allowed us to get into Gage Park, because there is no green space for soccer. And so that was a huge favor, and we're very grateful for that. We've been able to do carnivals and street parties, and the list goes on. So I'm not going to do too much of what we've done, although we'll give you a snapshot of that. And then we're going to point to our action plan, things that we're working towards, and things that we're putting on your radar, because we need your support. Thanks.
Thanks, Tammy.
I'm Tim Brand, and I'm a resident of Crown Point, and one of the things that I'm really excited about, I don't know if you could maybe tell, is Crown Point Youth Soccer. And it's Crown Point Youth Soccer is a low-cost, our soccer league has had an annual league fee of $35, and it runs from Victoria Day to Labor Day every year. And we also, while it's low cost, we also try to make sure that it's a quality soccer program. So we run the league on Wednesday nights. We have practices and games all in Gage Park, and it's really great. Last year, we had the most kids that we've had in the last 4 years. We had 107 kids participate, so we had 8 teams in 2 divisions, and that was really cool for us. We've been so slowly growing through it this year. So this league has been very important for me because it just promotes a bunch of different things like physical activity, teamwork, and even just a place for families to be together. Yeah, I love being a part of it. I love coming on Wednesday nights, helping to set up the league. I love it because the kids get excited. Going to schools after they get their uniforms, you get to see the uniforms at the school. And the other part that I love about the atmosphere of the league is just how much family-oriented it is. It's a place where people get to hang out and be together, parents to watch their kids, families to watch their kids, and the kids to have a whole lot of fun playing some soccer. So that's one of the things that I'm really excited about. Aaliyah wanted to say something. Oh. All right.
Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Alita Van Dyke. I'm a resident of Crown Point, and I'm also the co-secretary of the Crown Point Community Planning Team Executive. One of the strengths of the Crown Point community is its amazing and supportive partnerships with the service providers in the area. The Kiwanis Boys and Girls Club on Ellis Ave partners with the Crown Point Community Planning Team to provide a music program to boys and girls who want to learn how to play musical instruments. The YWCA on Ottawa Street partners with the Crown Point Community Planning Team in providing a girls program in their newly created and renovated Girls Lounge, and the Ottawa Street YWCA also has provided an office for the Crown Point Community Planning Team, which is fantastic for us to use. Crown Point also partners with the Hamilton Public Library, Kenilworth Branch, the Castle Project, a program to raise awareness about cancer screening, and a number of churches within the Crown Point boundaries. The Boys and Girls Club music program, the YWCA Girls Program, the Castle Project, and the New Hope Community Bikes received grants from the Hamilton Community Foundation through their partnership with the Crown Point Community Planning Team. We would now like to tell you about some of the activities and projects that we are currently working on from our action plan. I'll invite Tony.
Hi, my name is Tony Lema, and I'm the treasurer of Crown Point. I'm also the Team D lead, and right now we're working on the revitalization of Kenilworth, and I have a hard time explaining what we do because I think it's a little broad. And it's broad because it incorporates not just Kenilworth, but also parts of Barton Street, more specifically between Ottawa and Gage. And there's so much work that needs to be done in that area, I feel, that it's a bigger task than we can manage. Thankfully, though, there's the Barton Street Kenilworth Avenue corridor study ongoing right now by the city, and we'd like to work with the city to input the residents' point of view and our vision for the Kenilworth revitalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Good morning, Council. My name is Evan Fraser. I'm co-chair of Crown Point as well. Thank you.
I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking it. He's also my bicycle mechanic. How are you, Evan? The floor is yours.
Good. No, it's not a problem. It's working, so you can keep going. I'm actually here at this moment to represent Mary, talking about the Jane's Walk and Complete Streets. So I'm going to read a brief thing she wrote about it and hope I do her justice. Complete Streets considers pedestrians, cyclists, planters, and traffic moving at a calm and safe speed. It means safe routes for children, for schools, safe avenues for children to get to schools, for the ones who walk, cycle, and skateboard, for the mums and dads with varying aged children, some still in carriages, getting to school along sidewalks that are clear and beautiful. Complete streets are good for businesses, and businesses are good for communities, especially locally owned and operated businesses. These are invested people who care about their neighborhoods, and they are a draw, and should, in Mary's humble opinion, get tax breaks and hands up as opposed to those who board up their doors and windows while receiving tax incentives. Small business owners are also the eyes on the street, as are the people who walk regularly, and those whose daily routines allow for a 20-minute rest on a sidewalk bench. Our streets need more businesses, more pedestrians, more aesthetically pleasing attributes like trees and artwork. This is a segue to what we'd like to see happen on Kenilworth Avenue, rebuilding and revisiting a once vibrant street, which has now been reduced to a traffic conduit. With a few brave souls who must feel forgotten, I'd like to applaud them and imagine them as the cornerstones for a new destination street in the city of Hamilton. We would like to thank Councillor Marula for the 40-kilometer-an-hour speed reduction through the residential stretch of Kenilworth Avenue. We would love to see 30 kilometers an hour on all residential city-side streets. That is something we can all do, free of cost, that will begin to make our community and streets more pedestrian-friendly and safe. We want to see the Cannon bike lanes extend to be on Kenilworth, and we will work towards that. In Crown Point, I live, I shop, I drive, I walk, and I work. My hope is that more and more people opt to help put the public back in our public spaces. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Evan.
Hi, I'm Nellie, and I'm a resident of Crown Point. When I joined the team about a year ago, well, I guess it was a little bit more than that. Anyways, one thing I noticed was that we had so many good ideas, but we were having trouble connecting with our neighbors and getting the message out and getting people on board. So that's kind of been my little area of working. That's what I'm excited about. So we started, the first thing I did was I sat down with a friend, actually it was my community developer, and she showed me how to set up a web page. So we sat down together and I started a web page for our community, and we've been running that. And if you want to check us out, it's Crown Point Hamilton at WordPress.com, I believe. Anyways, you guys got it. So check it out, because we work at keeping that maintained, and there's different things that are tracked on there. And for example, what Tony's doing on Kenilworth, we put up his latest thing, and we're trying to keep it up to date. So that was the first step. But, you know, that's kind of our voice outwards. What we really want is community engagement. So there was a Facebook page, but it was a page, and it wasn't people speaking to each other. So we kind of shut that down and opened up a group. So now we have a Facebook group for Crown Point called Crown Point Hub. So check that out, because that is a place where neighbors are connecting with neighbors and telling them what's going on. In fact, they all know we're here, and there was all kinds of mad discussions this morning about how to get here and the weather, and can you get a ride, and I'm going to take the bus, and what am I going to do? So it's just been a really cool place to connect with each other. The last thing that we've been working on, and this is like really new, we started, I don't know, was it? Oh yeah, November, end of November. Two of us said, you know what? I think we need to communicate even better, because not everybody in our community is on the web, and nobody, well, not nobody, but not everybody gets the Spectator, and it's not a way for us to communicate. How are we going to connect with everybody? And so we decided that what we needed to get started was a newspaper. So with 2 people on board, we said, okay, we're going ahead. And the amazing thing is that, you know, once the train is moving, everybody wants to jump on. And now we are set for delivery date of March 1st, our delivery for whatever. March 1st is our delivery date. We're going to have our first 10,000 papers out. We're working on our front page right now. These are the proofs. It's very exciting. And there's no longer just 2 of us on this team. We would never have gotten that far. We've got at least 15 plus people involved. So it's very exciting. And I'm just really, I think the thing that's the most exciting is, you know, my neighborhood is filled with great people with great ideas, and I've seen my role is getting those people connected and getting the word out there, and we are moving. We are on this train, and we are going, and I'm very excited to be part of that, so thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Now, 3 speakers. I have, is there more? No. Mayor Bettina, do you have a question, sir?
Well, a couple of comments and a question. First,
we have one little closing bookend, if that's okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we like to talk.
Oh, it's all good. So do I.
So 2 last things. Yeah, I know. No comment. 2 last things in our action plan. One is a youth council, who the youth want to be a part of actually being a voice in the community. So not necessarily creating events for themselves, well, that's part of it, but they actually want to make change in their community. So that's a development. And the last development,
That's her speech. She's.
Oh, that's okay. And the last piece is, maybe you saw on the Spectator on Saturday, the Wyke, that fancy looking bike with some kids stuffed in it. Cargo bike. So that's coming to the Crown Point near you. And one of the people in the picture was Tim, and his daughter Aaliyah was fashioning how to sit nice comfortably in that Wyke bike. And the point of that is to be a bike share, to encourage more pedestrian and cycling in the community, more affordable and accessible transportation. So we want to increase that to begin to go beyond Crown Point to all of the city of Hamilton with things that make it accessible for moms or parents to get their kids to school, to get groceries. So we were going to wheel it in, but apparently you just can't get around, you guys. But if, with your permission, can Aaliyah hand out each of you a button?
Yep. Okay. Floor is yours.
And then, if you want to close while she's doing that.
So while these fabulous buttons are being handed out, I wanted to quickly go through a couple thank yous and speak very, very briefly from my heart. We would like to thank the Hamilton Community Foundation, the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, Chris Murray and his city staff team, councillors, particularly Bernie and Sam, community workers, Rebecca Dahl, President, David Derbyshire, past, and all the residents, businesses, organizations, and faith groups that are contributing to Crown Point community, and for all those who braved the snow and took time off today from work and school to come here. Trying to pass a message across as to why Crown Point deserves a few minutes of your time is difficult, especially when we're on a floor with a group of city councillors. And as I was sitting there with the gracious amount of time I had to think about it, that I was able to find one thing that really summed up how I felt, and it is in our Crown Point Neighbourhood Action Plan booklet on page 18, and it was from a visioning session that we had in Crown Point where citizens came and said what they want to see in their community. And the one thing that, as every day goes on, every time I wake up in the morning and I check my emails or I check the Facebook page or the website, it is that the big picture, the dreaming about the big picture is being realized. It is gradually being realized, and that realization is not possible with the people you see standing in front of you. It's not possible with the community foundation alone or the city alone, but it is a direct collaboration of all these people who have a vested interest in the city of Hamilton. And I truly didn't realize what that meant until my recent business endeavors had me go out of town, and it was weird to hear the stereotypes of Hamilton from outside of the city, Hamilton being Steel Town. And I'm proud of Steel Town. Hamilton's dirty. Yeah, it's dirty and it's dangerous, as is an occasional city. There's crimes in every city. But what nobody realizes is that when I drive over the Skyway Bridge from Burlington and I see the smokestacks of Dofasco and I see the layout of Hamilton, I don't get the, oh, I'm in Hamilton feeling. I get the, I'm home feeling. And that is something that was easily demonstrated to people that didn't share that previously, but there was no way for them to feel that way. And it was also more prevalent in my Crown Point area. I've been co-chair for a number of years, and I found in passing out the newsletter that we previously had, people didn't know about Crown Point. People didn't know what we had to offer. And as it can't even be described in words what we have to offer. There's too much to offer. There's too many opportunities for people. And as you can see with the buttons going around and our helpers that are distributing the buttons, Crown Point affects those who are 2.5 feet tall, and Crown Point affects those who are 89 years old. So I want to personally, on behalf of Crown Point, thank each and every one of you for continued support. We look forward to working on you in the future. There's so much in the future, and I welcome you to Crown Point for any and all reasons. We're glad to have you. Thank you.
Now, if there aren't, Suzanne, would you like to?
I'll just end up with a thank you.
Sure.
I'd like to very much thank the residents of Crown Point and Gala for coming here today through the snow to be present at this presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Rebecca Dahl, the community development worker in those two neighborhoods, who actually stepped in midway through our process and really picked up the reins and ran with great expertise and great sensitivity those two neighborhoods, plus a third that she has. So, and I'd like to thank you, as always, for your time and attention.
Not a problem, sir. But Suzanne, I believe the mayor has a question. Go ahead.
Well, I do, and I want to say 86 years ago when my father arrived in Canada, he lived on Gertrude Street in Beach Road neighborhood, Crown Point. My son took his first fresh air breaths when we lived at Maple and Balmoral in Gage Park. It was a sunny May 1981, and he got sunburn on his cheeks, and Dr. Dingwall gave my wife heck for this baby getting a sunburn on his cheeks. Lloyd George School, Charles Juravinsky went to Lloyd George School. I went to Delta. The leading cultural resource company in the world is a company called Lord Cultural. And they, for instance, just did the Chicago Cultural Plan. And they've done every great museum in the world. And Barry Lord grew up on Campbell Avenue and would be interested in doing something for his old city in those terms. This is the leading cultural resource company in the world, Crown Point resident. So once again, as I said to the Gala folks, there needs to be some archival work done, and I'd be happy to do it because I grew up just a couple of blocks east of Kenilworth. You had an LRT when I was a kid. The streetcar went right up Kenilworth Avenue. And I went to Delta, and that's my question. I'm still not convinced that Delta should be closed, and I wonder what the neighborhood's interaction was during the ARC process with regard to the future of Delta School. So could someone answer that through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Who would like to take a shot at that? Even though it's not a city council issue. There's a governance issue.
One thing that we, is it okay if I answer?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One thing that we work on is we're asset-based, so that means that if we have somebody that's interested and willing to stand in and deal with the question gets dealt with. And at this point, there hasn't been somebody on our little Crown Point team that's really going for it. However, because I follow several teams, we've been posting stuff, especially about Parkview and that whole issue. So I'm hoping that in time we'll get someone on board that can take that on, but we have to work with the assets that we have, and at this point we haven't really got someone that's going to bat for that one.
Have you contacted the elected trustee, Ray Mulholland, and Tim Simmons, by any chance?
Pardon?
Tim Simmons and
Yeah,
Ray
I've
Mulholland.
heard about him, yeah.
I have the floor. I have the floor. No.
Mayor Bettina, you have the floor now.
Thank you. And I still have the floor. This is a very serious issue, the closing of a high school. That is a historic heritage building. The only issue with it seems to be access. We spoke with David Onley, the Lieutenant Governor, yesterday, and he said he laid a complaint at Osgood Hall, which is almost 200 years old, and they found access. So he can go to Osgood Hall in his electric scooter. So I understand where the responsibilities lie, but all of us around this table and the neighbors have a right to be heard on the issue of schools closing in their neighborhoods. And so I'm not convinced that Delta shouldn't continue on as a school. And if you want somebody to wave that banner, I'll be glad to do it on your behalf.
Good to hear.
Now on city issues, who's next on the list is Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and it's just been refreshing to hear both from Gibson, Lansdale, and Crown, and especially to Brenda and Tammy. Thank you so much for your kind words about Councillor Morelli. I can tell you in the last several years, in spite of him having to conserve his energy after going through his first bout medically about 9 years ago, he often took me on tour bouts, Mr. Deputy Mayor, throughout the Ward 3, the Robert Land area, the Keiths, the Gage. He was so proud of the rebirth generally that was going on in his ward, with obviously pockets of residential and commercial that still needed a lot of work and support through the municipality. The stadium precinct itself is obvious. It's going to be just a jewel down the road in terms of the rejuvenation across that area. So to you two ladies especially, who went out of your way to mention and recognize Councillor Morelli, God rest his soul, thank you very, very much. Could I ask a general question, Mr. Deputy Mayor? Whoever wants to take a stab at it, Tammy, Adam, whoever wants to take a stab at it, in your neighborhoods, are you finding mostly it's generational families of Hamiltonians that have hung in there and now are part of the rebirth? Or do you find there's a migration from the GTA that's coming into the inner city, maybe because prices and housing are affordable? They see some quality of life improving with municipal support, park development, neighborhood plans, the multicultural component. One of you want to just kind of give me a little flavor as to what you're seeing that are joining in with the Crown Point Neighbourhood Action Plan, the Gibson Lansdale, just because, and as the mayor mentioned, with some of the former historic ethnocultural groups, my family of Armenian background, knowing the Gibson, Princess Street, Barton area incredibly well, but that was 60 years ago. So Mr. Deputy Mayor, through to Tammy or Adam, just give me a flavor as to the demographics that are coming in.
From my perspective, it's a little bit of both. I've been in the Crown Point community for about 10 years, so I'd say it's people who've been there for enough years to feel the lay of the land, but I don't remember seeing too many people who've been there for generations and generations and are now stepping up to be a part of the planning team. That's our goal. We're going to get them out as well, but it's newer faces, but not the newest faces. So we do see a lot of people moving in from Toronto. Just down my street, 2 new houses sold to people who are coming from Toronto, and I don't think that we'll see them until they get the lay of the land. So my perspective, it's people who've been there for a few years, at least I can speak for us, right? We're all kind of new, so.
Great. Adam, possibly a comment too, please, your observation?
It's, on my street in particular, we have what we call the original 4. It was at point the original 6, and 2 houses have passed away, but now there's the original 4. And the original 4 remembers it when Hamilton had the light rapid transit. They've been there 75 years. The couples have been married in that house. One lady in particular, she was born in the house.
Wow.
She was married in regained the house and is still there now. She's 86. And it is interesting, today, the reason you asked that is, actually it's very interesting you asked that. Today in particular, when I was coming here, I had to stop at my father's house to make sure the snow was moved away. And when I got there, my sidewalk had been cleared. One of my neighbors religiously with a snow blower, if it's 1 inch or 4 feet, he brings the snow blower out and clears all the sidewalks. And there was a number of young children that live on my street today, and they were going around to the houses that I know belonged to the original 4, and they were clearing the sidewalk. They were clearing the pathways, giving them ways to get to their doors and back. And the elderly gentleman and the woman there were giving them cookies. And I stopped and asked the mother, are they not going to school today? And she turned to me and said, on some days like today, this is more important than school. Taking time to help your neighbors, taking time to help them. And in general, one thing with Crown Point is such a vast size. I mean, Crown Point is massive. They can attest to that. And the people that live in my area compared to the people that live down near Barton Street are completely different. Up in my area, where we're close to the school, St. John the Baptist, there's a lot of young families moving there from out of town. But they will also have the elderlies that are there and keep the stories up.
That's great, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And I've always said a neighborhood that sticks together will succeed together eventually too. And our community is a pocket of a multitude of these neighborhoods. So, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's so, as a mountain councillor who's tried to always be supportive of initiatives in areas that need the extra resources, it's very encouraging to hear what I've heard today from 3 neighborhoods. Thanks, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Farr?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I'm sorry I missed some of it. I had a little bit of a ward issue, but I did read the Crown Point Action Plan, and it's a great one among other very good and well thought out action plans, thanks to devoted community volunteers such as yourself. And clearly through this plan you have some terrific partners. I know there's a good focus on keeping youth busy after school, weekends, that sort of thing. Certainly I can attest to the great programming 7 days a week, morning, noon, and night at the Boys and Girls Club. So to see that content peppered through and their involvement, that's significant, I think. One of the things I just wanted to focus on, the only thing really, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, is your focus on the pipeline. You want in Goal B, Action 5, to continue the development of the pipeline as a walking and cycling trail. I've noticed in recent years some pretty good aesthetic improvements along that pipeline. I think it's a unique piece that connects pretty much the 7-Eleven to the Strathbarton Mall. It's something that can be developed, and a lot of great ideas clearly you've thought out, and you want to work as it relates to the development or continued development of the walking and cycling, but also this train garden project. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, what is that, and how does it work as it relates to the pipeline? It sounds intriguing to me.
Did you say train?
It says...
Because then I don't know what that is.
Pipeline Train Garden Project, that's cool.
I think it meant to be trail, so the pipeline trail. Thanks for pointing out our error. But it's fascinating.
Less of a capital expense there, Jay.
Yeah, so again, like you said, it's a piece of land that really has a lot of potential, and so we've had lots of people interested in doing stuff, whether it's creating art along the fence lines or doing community gardens, because there is green space on both sides of that trail, putting benches in. Even for cycling, there's some jutted kind of curbs that need to be kind of straightened out. So really making it more used. Lots of people use it to get to school, but it could be used more, and things that would make it aesthetically pleasing. So community gardens, urban farming, those kind of things are being thrown out as ideas to really get the neighbors to care for it. We've started a garden. We did a little patch of a community garden, but we really need someone to water it, and they have to live close by. And so we've got to think better about how we're going to make that happen. But we really want it to be a lush garden that people will want to walk just for the sake of walking through it. So that's the minimal plan idea, if that helps.
Well, no, that's great. I wish you the best of luck with this and all the other action items in this plan. And once again, congratulations on where you've come in a rather short order, and best of luck for the future for this great neighborhood.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Actually, I'm going to pass the chair over to Mayor Bertina. And let me just take this opportunity to emphasize how much I'm thankful, not only as a resident, but the councillor that represents a portion of Crown Point. Through you, Mr. Mayor, let me emphasize one thing that Councillor Morelli and I diligently worked towards was to create an environment of these grassroots empowerment processes that have very little political interference and all about the residential neighborhoods and not about political manipulation of any kind. So Councillor Morelli and I focused quite strongly in a arm's length approach in ensuring if you develop this plan, it's developed household per household, neighborhood by neighborhood. And when there was an issue with Crown Point not developing its plan, I, at that time, and in conjunction with Councillor Morelli, didn't have an issue with it, because this is about you, it's not about me, it wasn't about Councillor Morelli, and it's not about this council. It's about the neighborhood and Crown Point. And you made this happen, nobody else, and don't let anybody else interfere with the success that you've accomplished. And I commend you, I congratulate you, keep up the great work, because we're a better city because of you, not because of this council. Thanks very much. I think we've now concluded this. It's all motion to receive the presentation, moved by Clark, seconded by Pearson. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Clark.
If I may, just on the two neighborhood action plans and on the entire program, I wanted to thank both of the groups. First off, my granddaughter was looking through on Joe's streaming. My wife has a new computer. The granddaughter didn't say, oh, but there's Papa. She said, oh, a crown. So she pointed out the young fellow there is crown, which I thought was kind of cute. So now I have to buy a crown on my way home. Thank you. But with regards to the successes of these programs, what Councillor Marula articulated is so true. When we first started talking about this, and I remember Paul and I having a number of conversations in my office, there was trepidation. We didn't know what the community was really going to do with this. We had a vision, the council had a vision of how this might work, but it might not have worked had it not been for the communities actually taking hold of it and running with it. And it's the communities that's made it a success. I mean, Paul, you're at the top, so you get all the accolades, but realistically, it's all the guys underneath that are working so hard. So I just wanted to thank them so much for what you're doing in our communities, really making the city a better day. And I also heard the mayor say that the Lieutenant Governor got Osgood Hall accessible for him. I have to find out why, because a year and a half ago I can't get out of these doors when I'm with my canes, and they're still not functioning. So I'll call him and find out how he did that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Whitehead.
Mr. Chair, it's so refreshing every time we have one of these neighborhood groups come in and present their action plan, their commitment and dedication and cohesion. I think it's the cohesion part that I find very endearing and comforting, that there's hope. There's hope not only in the neighborhoods that have embarked and been empowered and pulling the community together to create these great plans. But there's hope for the city when you see the type of neighborhoods that have rose to the occasion, coalesced, and pulled together to do these kinds of things. And I think it goes without saying that not only am I proud of those neighborhoods, but I hope that it's picked up beyond the neighborhoods that are currently doing it and expanded to the broader community, because it's excellent what is taking place here in this community. Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further speakers, may I have a motion to receive the presentations? Moved. Oh, we did that already. Now we have to go in camera. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? Could we have an update on the in-camera issue that we're presented with right now?
Well, firstly, you would require a motion to approve the recommendations in the neighborhood report.
Okay, so that's moved by Pearson, seconded by Clark. All in favor? Carried.
And now at 12 o'clock, the committee is to move in camera for external legal counsel dealing with the licensing standards issue.
As a result of the time sensitivity issue surrounding the out-of-town legal counsel. Is that correct?
Outside legal counsel.
That's correct. So moved by Collins, seconded by Whitehead. Councillor Clark.
Is that the only in-camera item that we have today?
Yes.
The discussion around, I think it's item 8.1, we're dealing with named people. We're looking to the clerk. Should we be having that in camera?
No. No, that's out of camera.
I don't see how. There may be other candidates that we name, and we may be talking about them. It should be an in-camera session.
I don't believe that's the process, unless you want to bring that forward openly to go in there, and we'll vote on that accordingly. But at this point, do you have a motion?
I just met with Rose Caterini, and she agreed, and so did Lisa Pasternak.
Well, if you have a motion to that effect, to include that in the in-camera session, so then move it, if you have a seconder, and we'll vote on it.
No, I think I'll wait until the lawyer is here to deal with it, since I can see what you're doing.
What am I doing? It's open and transparent. If you have a motion, Councillor Clark, then bring it forward. If you can't find a seconder, then it doesn't have merit to this council. Thank you.
Until the advice is provided by the lawyer, I'll wait for that. Thank you.
Now, Madam Clerk, we have a motion on the floor to go in camera, moved by Collins, seconded by Jackson. All in favor? Carried.